straightforward explanation. Only Celeste remained calm, and she asked Monokuma with a bored look on her face. Of course, it is not as simple as running up and taking it, is it?
Oh, how mean! Do I look the kind of headmaster that would interfere with his students' graduation? Forget the gunfire salutes. I'm gonna send my graduates off with some fireworks. 100 fireworks to be exact, enough for 20 seconds of hardcore partying. The more perceptive students immediately realized what he was talking about. The bombs installed inside each Monokuma. They would explode one after the other, filling the hallway with fire as soon as time started. After 15 seconds, the me standing at the back of the hall is gonna sacrifice himself to give you guys one final firework. By the way, this probably isn't important, but that button isn't very durable. This graduation exam was Monokuma's way of saying that he had no intention of letting anyone leave. It was clear from the explosion the students saw during the entrance exam that the halls of Hope's Peak Academy would be bathed in fire. Even if someone was lucky enough to survive the explosions, the burns on their body alone would be enough to send them into a fatal shock. Their lungs might be completely incinerated by the scorched air before that. Even if they sacrificed one student to run through, the odds were low that they would even succeed. But there was no reason for every student to run in at once either, and a shadow of despair fell upon their faces. Nice, very nice. I almost want to take a picture so I have those faces as a souvenir.
As Monokuma laughed from behind the monitor, Sakura stepped forward.
I'll do it. I have only seen the explosion once, but I believe I'm capable of withstanding its power.
No, shouted Aoi. You can't. Even if you couldn't handle 100 of these explosions.
Sakura shook her head. I'm the only one who even has a chance.
Suddenly, Mondo remembered the motorcycle he parked inside the dormitory and said,
Hold up, that motorcycle might be fast enough to go through those explosions. I'll do it. Don't be hasty, urged Sakura. Even if the motorcycle's unharmed by the explosion, that doesn't mean its rider will be.
As Sakura and others continued their debate, one person stepped toward the hallway lined with Monokumas.
I'll do it.
Mukuro! Screamed Makoto weakly. I couldn't figure out whose voice that was in between that. It says Makuro! It fucking says Makuro! Mukuro, with her back facing Makoto, turned her head to the side slightly, and gave him a small nod. She knew it would come to this. She knew why Monokuma would pose such an impossible exam. Junko's already looking forward to the next despair game. What page am I on? Wow, 636. She's going to erase everyone's memories, including mine. She just wants to torment us and fill us with despair before that happens. But Mukuro knew her sister's personality all too well, and that's why she was confident. She knew that the escape button was real. Whenever Junko brought despair to others, she always made sure there was a possibility that despair would befall her instead. If the students won this gamble and made it through this horrible situation, they would finally escape to the outside world. That outcome would obviously fill Junko with immense despair. In the same way she left a clue in Monokuma's control program, Junko could not be satisfied unless she took pains to assure her own destruction. It was this quality that made Junko the ultimate despair. That's why Mukuro was determined to do it. She knew she was the only person who stood a chance at making the outcome possible, even if she had to risk her life. But, right now, Mukuro wanted to live more than anything. She wanted to hold on to this world, a world she had no interest in previously. She didn't even know if this hesitation she felt was disappointing or not, but she wanted to live and continue searching for a new path. A path where she could abandon her submission to despair, where she could accept the sins of the past and continue to live. Mukuro, who was known as a war machine, found her heart beset by overwhelming fear and anxiety. Until now, it had never occurred to her that determination was necessary to live. As if she was brushing that fear aside, she quietly said, Thank you, Makoto. Unfortunately, the words she said to the boy who showed her new possibilities never reached his ears. Sakura, however, heard her and frowned as she said, If you're planning to sacrifice yourself as an act of penance, I'll stop you with all my power. Though her words were firm, there was unmistakable affection hiding in them. Both girls had dedicated their lives to battle, and yet Mukuro felt a twinge of jealousy towards Sakura for possessing something she lacked. Mukuro leaned towards Sakura and whispered in her ear.
What? Are you serious?
As Sakura's frown intensified, Monokuma's voice blared throughout the halls.
All right, I'm gonna start the exam now. Ready, set, go!
There was no time for questions or objections. The frontmost Monokuma exploded, sending a roaring wave of heat through the hall. But Mukuro didn't look away. She began moving, powered by resolute determination. As soon as the graduation exam started, the mastermind focused her control entirely on the Monokuma holding the escape button, and completely synchronized her field of vision with it. She knew what was going to happen next. She could predict what her sister, Mukuro, would do in this exact situation, where she would choose to focus her superhuman skill with weaponry. And so, through Monokuma's eyes, she watched the scene unfold exactly as she had predicted. A pointed metal bar burst through the explosions, heading straight for the weak point of the Monokuma holding the escape button. Specifically, it was aiming for the point where the bomb's detonation system and Monokuma's power source overlapped. It flew straight and true, as if it had been fired by a master archer. In order to bring despair to Monokuma, and by extension Junko as well, the super soldier known as Mukuro Ikusaba threw the pipe like a spear so it could attack the same weak point she had pierced in the nurse's office. As explosions filled the hallway until only fire remained visible, the spear's speed and precision as it soared to its target defied all human logic. But the mastermind knew. She knew Mukuro had used her power to fill the world with despair. Power was all that disappointing girl had, but that power was useless against Monokuma. The mastermind had predicted that Mukuro would put all her effort into that throw, and Monokuma caught the metal bar perfectly between his hands. The force of the throw knocked Monokuma back several yards, but the pointed end of the bar never pierced through his chest. Well, that was disappointing. The mastermind turned to look at a different monitor. She wanted to see the look on Mukuro's face when she realized that she failed to strike Monokuma. The despair of seeing the final Monokuma explode right before her eyes, completely obliterating the escape button. She wanted to sear this memory of her disappointing sister's final moments as her newfound hope sank into a dark pit of despair. On instinct, she turned her attention to the surveillance camera that hadn't been destroyed, but instead of seeing Mukuro and the others, she only saw Sakura, who looked as though she had finished launching an attack. She only thought it was strange for 1 second, but then the hopelessly powerful mastermind completely understood the situation and shifted her point of view to Monokuma. But because of that single second, Junko would feel just a pang of despair. 3 seconds left. Amid the smoke, flames, and heat encircling the hallway, it burst through with the speed of a cannon shell. It glared at Monokuma with hot, boiling eyes that betrayed the icy expression on its face, and then, sharply, swiftly, strongly, it transformed into a living weapon that cuts through everything, revealing its true form in that hall of despair. 2 seconds left. Monokuma, who was still holding the metal bar in his hands, tried to move, but, at that exact moment, the living weapon carved a path through the flames and appeared before him. Its body, which had never been wounded on any battlefield, was sustaining all manners of burns and injuries. But even so, it did not falter. The fire in its eyes never flickered once. 1 second left. The living weapon, Mukuro, slammed her knee into the back of the metal bar Monokuma was holding. The sharp tip of that metal bar pierced through Monokuma like a rail spike, shredding the detonator and his power source into pieces. Time's up. The 100 explosions ceased and smoke blanketed the hallway. Mukuro had dived into Monokuma and the pristine escape button now rested in her hand. She and the other students of Hope's Peak Academy had passed the graduation exam. It was only a small amount of despair. Monokuma had tasted it in only 3 seconds. Junko. Mukuro looked down at Monokuma. He could no longer move or self-destruct. When she spoke to him, a static-filled voice emitted from his mouth. It seemed his communication function still worked.
Boop, boop, boop. I never expected you to do that.
He still sounded like Monokuma. It seems his voice modulator was unharmed as well.
I must have overestimated you. I never thought you'd need anybody's help on the battlefield.
When I give the signal, please launch me forward with a roundhouse kick. Mukuro whispered these words to Sakura just before the explosion started. Ah, I see. After Mukuro threw the metal bar, she jumped into the air at the exact moment Sakura unleashed a roundhouse kick. Right when Sakura's foot made contact with her own, Mukuro used the force generated by her kick to propel herself at Monokuma. Using the ultimate martial artist's superhuman attack like a springboard, she shot herself through the air like an artillery shell. Enduring intense heat, shrapnel, and blood-draining G-force, she stayed conscious as she charged through the hallway engulfed with explosions and despair. Mukuro trusted Junko. She trusted Junko to predict that she'd throw the metal bar and catch it accordingly. Then she'd try to look at her face as the despair sets in. The Junko Enoshima she knew would definitely do that. Although Mukuro hadn't predicted that her sister would try to kill her with the spears of Gungnir, she had a better understanding of her actions now. As Mukuro stared Monokuma in his face, all he could do was laugh scornfully.
You put your life in someone else's hands for a deadly battle? I don't know how I feel about that. You'll always be a half-assed disappointment. I guess this time I'll just say I lost because I didn't see this much disappointment coming. The end, the end.
Mukuro shook her head at Monokuma. No, you're wrong, Junko.
Huh?
If you want to talk about winning or losing, I think we lost before we even started. Mukuro's eyes shifted from side to side, as if she was unsure of something, and she fidgeted in place as she continued to talk. No matter how much despair they felt, you didn't think they'd kill each other the way they were before. That's why you erased their memories. They aren't like the others you forced in the past. You knew these students would never do it. That's what you believed, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
So, it's okay, Junko. I'll bring back everyone's memories someday, and I'll show you everyone's happiness and their bonds. I'll show all that to you, and fill you with even more despair. Mukuro nodded after she said this, as if to cheer her sister up. After several seconds of silence, Monokuma responded.
You finally beat me this one time, and that lame speech is the best you can do? You're such a disappointment. You never fill me with despair. It's just constant disappointment.
After pouting like a sore loser, Monokuma continued to speak in his usual tone.
But you guys will be back. And when that time comes, I'll invite you guys to a wonderful place. I found out about this fun island while I was running things here.
Monokuma's laughter filled the room before the static finally cut out, and his remains fell silent. He wouldn't be talking again anytime soon. The mastermind was already preparing a new despair to bring to the world and to the students of Hope's Peak Academy, Junko included. In the end, the mastermind stayed in her Monokuma persona until the very end, and Junko Enoshima never showed her face again. It was as if she resented the despair Mukuro had given her. That thought almost filled Mukuro with despair, but when she heard her classmates calling for her, she sealed that despair into the depths of her heart. From now on, she would seal away all her despair. And one day, when she can give Junko the perfect despair, she'll unleash all that despair she's stored and plunge with her sister into a dark abyss. I won't leave my sister alone. In the end, that was the first hope that disappointing older sister had felt since she was a child. Several hours later. Mukuro, are you really going to go out wearing that wig? After receiving a blood transfusion of the correct blood type, Makoto was beginning to show signs of recovering. Mukuro, holding her wig to disguise herself as Junko Enoshima, nodded. If I live as Junko, I might be able to understand her better. Despite that, Mukuro's voice still sounded like her own, as if she hadn't fully decided. And I've made up my mind. While I'm out there, I've decided I'll accept everyone's hatred toward me, and toward Junko. I can't die until I've destroyed all the despair that Junko has spread. The damage that ultimate despair inflicted upon the world could not be measured in terms of money, culture, or even human life. Television broadcasts had already begun informing people that Junko Enoshima and Mukuro Ikusaba were the heart of ultimate despair. Among the survivors in the outside world, there are still people who hadn't been tainted by despair yet. Regardless of the fact that she released Makoto and the others, to these survivors she was nothing more than the reason the world ended. And to the terrorists wearing Monokuma masks who continued to ravage the world, Mukuro was nothing but a traitor. She was now in the hopeless situation of being enemies with most of humanity, but Mukuro wasn't making a big deal out of it. I'm going to try not to kill anyone who comes after me for revenge.
Wouldn't it be safer to just turn yourself in? Wondered Yasuhiro. Well, you might just get executed instead, but you could live to be an old lady if your trial keeps getting pushed back.
Mukuro slowly shook her head at Yasuhiro. Laws, justice, these things no longer exist. Is it really that bad out there? Maybe we should just stay in here. Byakuya glared at Yasuhiro with contempt. Ignorant idiots should just shut up. Your fate won't change whether you stay in here or not. Though he was shocked to learn that Togami Corporation had been destroyed, Byakuya continued to remain firm and proud, even toward Mukuro. You
are a rare asset, continued Byakuya, so I'll let you live for now. Depending on your actions, I may consider forgiving your crimes after I've built a new world. Only a Togami would boast that they're capable of forgiving the crime of ending the world.
You don't need to do that. I don't plan on just surviving.
After turning away from Byakuya, Mukuro looked at the other students. Everyone was reacting in their own way. Kyoko had a look of quiet preparation. Toko, having just changed back from Genocide Jack, was panicked and confused. Mukuro looked back on the 2 years she spent with them, then turned to Makoto, who shared the same memories as her, and gave him the escape button.
Just say in here, not stay. I love how I'm still reading it properly, though. Makoto, you press it.
Huh? Me?
I think it's better if you press it instead of me.
As she watched Makoto accept the button with some hesitation, Mukuro thought about what Monokuma said. You guys'll be back. Mukuro knew that Monokuma was telling the truth. After all, the file the students needed to fully restore their lost memories remained hidden in the academy. The research notes of Yasuke Matsuda, the ultimate neurologist. His research is the key to restoring everyone's memories. Even if the students no longer have their memories, they may be able to repair the bonds they had built among themselves over the past 2 years. But as long as their memories remained unrestored, the mastermind could still repeat her deadly plan. Although the island mentioned earlier sounded strange, the students could not turn their backs on the despair facing them. Then, let's go. Makoto remembered everything that was happening in the outside world. The boy who had chosen to remain inside the academy 2 years ago was now choosing to leave. How much did he struggle to come to that decision? But he was determined to face the despair awaiting him outside, and hid his internal conflict from the others. By protecting Makoto's hope, Mukuro would bring despair to her beloved sister. But she no longer knew if the end result of her goal would lead to hope or despair. She pulled the wig over her head and hid her face with her hands. Was she smiling because hope was waiting for her? Or was she crying because her path would lead to despair? When she lowered her hands, her face was devoid of all emotion. Mukuro no longer knew what expression she would wear on her face. At the same time, Makoto pressed the escape button. A siren began to wail as the turrets retracted into the ceiling. From beyond the heavy door, a bright light appeared. An infinite number of ifs and all the possibilities contained therein encased the world. Accepting everything, hope, despair, and even the feelings of that disappointing girl, Mukuro Ikusaba.
Thank you, Austin.